Hi everybody, welcome back. This is episode 7. Sorry, I got a squeaky chair. A little later than I planned. I've been really under the weather. I don't think I'm alone in suffering like this, but I had 4 or 5 days in bed, just really struggling to move, surviving on water and a couple of apples. I'm still not great. I'm still like really chesty and I've got loads of mucus and you can probably hear it in my voice. A little bit blotchy. Feeling still a bit rough if I'm honest, but still keen to get this out there. And yeah, my apologies for missing last week. I am just about able to get this recorded today. So yeah, I'm glad I'm back. I'm glad I'm doing it. I was going to carry on essentially from where I left off. I think I pretty much sort of touched or just finished touching on my addictions. And they've unfortunately taken up a lot of my years. I'm not ashamed to say that because I have overcome them. And I still continue to every day. I am an addict and I will always be, and I'll always fight that. But I've learned I've got so much more strength than I thought I had. I've learned to use tools like meetings, for instance, to gain ammunition, if you like, in the fight against caving in to my addictions and those worst possible scenarios. But yeah, I'll tell you a bit about it. So I was betraying everybody. I was living with mum, and I was betraying absolutely everybody and anybody in my life. I was desperate to avoid, and I was attending counselling, which I found so hard. I was seeing a specialist at the Tavistock, specialist in bereavement and trauma therapy, and she was nice. It wasn't so much that I struggled during the sessions; it was immediately afterwards. I found I'd often leave the session and feel so scared and so afraid of what I'd just confronted and what I just unloaded in her office and during that time. And every single time, it terrified me walking out that door. And I had the motorbike that I'd gotten. Mariana had chosen the bike. I think I touched on that before, but essentially I'd just passed my motorcycle licence or the theory test, and then in the immediate months after she passed, I was just so focused on getting that done. So I did, all the while still being high. Not while I was riding, I must admit, but it was my life was so introverted, and immediately I became so introverted and so afraid of relating to anybody. Not that I was afraid of relating to anybody, but it was so much harder for me to exist in the world. All of the friends, and I don't mean all of the friends, but 95% of the people that I used to have in my life pre-Mariana's death disappeared. They just vanished off the face of the earth. It didn't matter how many years or months or days of friendship or companionship or colleagueship that we'd had just vanished. And I understand why now. It's finally taken me all these years, but I do understand that for a lot of people, it's impossible for them to see me, let alone speak to me, because they don't know what to say and they can't find the words. And so rather than having me in their lives, it's easier for them not to. And I do understand it. I don't agree with it, but because I'm alone and because I've spent the majority of these years alone. And I don't want to be. Don't get me wrong, I've had some incredible friends. You know who you are if you're watching. You know what you mean to me. And they've got me through, and I'm so grateful for them. But it is a hard task of coming to terms with being a widower and being in grief, is that a lot of those people that you would have thought you could rely on will disappear. They will go away, and you will be left to face this alone to a certain degree. It's going to be difficult, and you're going to do it alone. Anyway, so I managed to survive as long as I could. I did eventually move to Dad's in Spain for not long. I think I was there for about a year initially. And I remained clean there, which was obviously one of the huge benefits of going there. And then I came back because I wanted to try and make a go of working and trying to get back into, you know, the skill set that I'd acquired over my career, and trying to get back into hotels. And so Dad and I and the dog, my Zeus, we'd all been in Spain, and we set this target of me coming back. So I started to prepare my CV, and eventually I got some good looking interviews and some good opportunities cropped up at you know, quite a prestigious, trendy, modern boutique hotel in London. And the reason I'm smiling is because this logistical journey wasn't easy, but we did it. And so sales, I had to send, because there's no flights. You can only get a flight from the UK to Spain with a dog, and he was a small dog. So we managed to do that flight. I mean, it was a challenge, but we did that flight. I've done it a couple of times now. Anyway, from Heathrow or Gatwick to Malaga. It's not direct, you have to change, but anyway, we've done it twice. And so the journey home, he couldn't get on a plane. There weren't any direct flights that would take a dog. So we had to pay. I'm laughing because this poor little thing, he suffered. I mean, he went through it, but we put him on a dog carrier. They came fairly well recommended, not personally, unfortunately, although I'll now do a lot better for the next time. If there is time, I'll have to use that. Anyway, we met these guys at a local car park, and they seemed really lovely, and the carrier was empty at the time, so Zeus was on his own, and there were like 4 crates, 2 below, 2 above, and they put him in this one above, and it seemed like it was going to be fine, and they were going to give us constant updates. So I was going to make my way on the plane with some luggage, and Zeus was going to make his way in the van with his bed and his blankets and his little teddy bears and stuff. And anyway, he did. And the plan was that I was going to go to Mum's, and I ended up doing that. I spent another year at Mum, well, a little less than a year at Mum's. But that journey, the poor little thing, I remember him turning up at Mum's address, and they knocked on the door. This was before I arrived, because if I'd have opened that door, I would have gone absolutely mental. But they gave him back to Mum, stinking of shit. And I washed him and bathed him and made sure he was all clean and lovely, and cleaned his bed. And there was no bed. And so, this poor little thing, they put him underneath. They'd moved the crates around. They picked up a dog who had travel sickness and spent the entire journey shitting on my Zeus, covering him in shit, covering his bed in shit, all his blankets in shit. I mean, this poor thing, he was traumatised by it, and he came back just stinking of shit. And there was no bed. They'd chosen to throw his bed out and destroy it. And of course, we never got a replacement. Fuckers. And I was kind of emotionally attached to that bed. That was one of the beds that we'd kept from Mariana's time. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the principle is that he had a fucking shitty journey, but he made it, and we were happy. We were doing all right. I'm pleased to say that I didn't cave initially, but I did cave. I was working at this hotel. I got the job. It was one of the worst hospitality jobs I've ever had in all of my life. And I've worked in hospitality for 15, 16 years. This was post-COVID, and it was disgusting how they treated staff, all staff, not just me. I was one of the front office managers and the guest experience manager, and my line manager was vile. She was a piece of work. And I mean, there were times when she knew what I'd gone through, and she didn't give a fuck. She was racist, she was intolerant, she was unsympathetic, unempathetic. She was best mates with the general manager of the place, and so, you know, they went swanning off skiing on their fucking helicopter every now and then, and no, it was ridiculous. The nepotism and favoritism was unreal. And, you know, I witnessed her being outspokenly racist often, and often called her out on it. And there were guys that were, you know, stupid and naive and young enough that didn't say shit. Anyway, it came to a standoff, and she got physical, or she nearly got physical with me. And I recognised the signs that I'd pressed self-destruct already, and I was already sort of starting to juggle my nightlife and coping with trying to work. And eventually, I presented a case to HR, and they dismissed it. And they said they weren't going to go with me. And I mean, I had video evidence of her getting physical with me and being really inappropriate. And they were more than happy to support her. So it didn't really help with my mental state. But I carried on, and I found a job. And Zeus was doing really well. He loved being with Mum. He loved being in her company. And, you know, during our time previously in Malaga, we'd managed to get him a diagnosis. He had this really rare condition called Chiari-like malformation, and it was a swelling on his cerebellum that meant that he had seizures often. Before we got the treatment of steroids for him, he often had seizures for sometimes 48 hours or longer. I mean, it was awful, really awful for him. But once we got the diagnosis out of pocket, we finally got him on steroids, and they made an incredible difference to his life. He'd never had a seizure again, not in all his life. He had once or twice he had a bit of discomfort. I mean, and then unfortunately the steroids were what killed him in the end, in that they gave him, and he developed Cushing's. But at the time he was doing so well. He loved being with Mum, and I've got some wonderful videos of that Christmas and that winter, of him enjoying the garden. And yeah, there were times when he was very stubborn, but fundamentally speaking, he loved being in Mum's company. And I mean, he's more of a lady's dog than he was a man's dog, although he favoured his daddy. And he loved his uncle Nico, and he loved his dad, my dad. My goodness, his grandpa he adored. So yeah, he was very fond of his family, and he had certain roles that he lived up to and certain things that he performed. But I was struggling, and I recognised some of the things, you know, when I think back now, and I'm so ashamed of some of the nights that I put him through. That does bring me a lot of shame. But I'm here. I'm still here. Anyway, I found another job. I don't know how I managed to get through that one, but I very quickly hit self-destruct on that as well. And I lasted 3 months, made sure that I terminated and handed in a resignation before they could fire me. But I did fuck it up, and I couldn't cope. Mum was very quickly on to what was going on, and it came to a head at the end of the year. I'd been there for literally just about a year, and Mum was desperate. She found it really difficult to confront me, and in the end it took a letter that she wrote asking me to leave, and she gave me 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live. And in that time I didn't have anything anymore. I'd spent all my wages, mostly up my nose, and I'd found no way forward. I'd gone backwards, and I was really struggling. I was really depressed. I was suicidal again. And I didn't know what to do. And Dad saved me. Dad came and said that he would take me back, and this was December 22. And initially I didn't want to stay long. I wanted to find a solution. I wanted to get well. I wanted to not be high anymore. It had cost me so much, you know, and then I had to do so much work on rebuilding the relationship with my mum, which I'm doing and will take a lot more work, but I'm approaching 4 years clean and I'm feeling pretty good about it. And I have still many, many things to do in my future. Thank you so much for sticking with us, guys. Thank you so much for listening along and supporting. I will be back on TikTok as well. Please come over there and start following the stories and sharing. Likewise on here, guys, please like comment, share, and subscribe to these videos. I can't tell you how much it helps. I hope you enjoy, and we will be back in a week's time for episode 8. All right, you take care. Bye now.